Kate, good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for sitting down and speaking with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with everybody today.
Appreciate it. We got a great crowd out here today. I'm curious, I was doing some quick research on United Airlines, 949 aircraft, 354 destinations, 165 million passengers last year, up 14% from the year before. But I want to talk about the people behind that organization, because we can talk about fleet size, we can talk about destinations, but the airline industry in particular, you need people.
You absolutely do. And it's the people that actually make the experience for the passengers. That's what really makes the difference. I mean, we all see it every day. No matter what service industry you're in, and we are in the service industry, it doesn't matter what movie is on the screen, or if there is a screen, or what food is being served. If you get great service, that's really makes the difference for us. So we've got 100,000 people now at United Airlines. I'm very excited about that, and really hiring for people that are really interested in providing great service.
And anytime you fly, I don't know if passengers realize this, I got a chance to do a story on the ramp at O'Hare with some of the baggage loaders, the ramp agents at United. And
That's a hard job.
It's a hard job.
It really is. I did that for one flight once, and I was like, oh, I need to go take a nap.
I mean, just lifting the luggage is hard enough.
Yeah.
But then I was out there, it was snowing, it was cold, it was windy. The plane pulls into the gate, the doors open up, the passengers come off, they're throwing bags off, throwing bags back on. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and that's just what you see right there. There is so much that happens behind the scenes. Everything from, what's going on your app, to how the flights are scheduled, to is this the right crew in the right place? I mean, if you really think about it, the number of flights that go off every day, it is an incredible ballet of things that need to happen to make a turn happen in 45 minutes to an hour for those aircraft.
It's amazing. You gotta have people.
It really is. It really is.
So the theme of this conversation, building a culture for workers and companies to thrive in times of change. The airline industry is constantly in a state of evolution, in a state of change. And I want to talk a little bit about your history, because you started about 26 years ago in 1998.
Thanks for calling me out.
At United Airlines. But in terms...
Seems like yesterday.
And that's it. I mean, the change is so rapid in this industry that you're almost a different company, different person every single day. But in the time that you've been with United, there was the terror attack on 9/11. Huge event for the airline industry. Bankruptcy, the Great Recession, a merger with Continental Airlines, and then a global pandemic. Tell me, what has made United able to stay so resilient through all those Black Swan events?
There were some good things that happened too during those times, but I think the thing that about airlines, and you mentioned it, I think I've worked for 5 different companies during my 26 years, because the company has really evolved and changed. And I think that that's the thing about people in the industry, is that they are about change. They are about being agile. They are about dealing with whatever gets thrown at them. And so while you mentioned 9/11 or the pandemic, those are awful things that happened to the world, but we got to be on the front lines of making the world better after that. So whether, in the case of the pandemic, whether it was bringing equipment to places that need it, ventilators to places that need it, or vaccines to places that needed it, or just equipment, we were part of making that happen. Or whether it was, helping refugees out of Afghanistan, for instance, we were there on the front lines of that. And so when bad things happen, there's always this part of what happens at United, which really is deep in our culture, of helping the people, helping humanity, quite frankly, start over. And that's what happens with us every time there's a little bit of a blip in the world scene.
That has to fire up your workforce as well,
really
that they're being those change agents.
It really does. And change, as you all know, if you can get people proud about the change and engaged with the change, that's when the magic happens, because it takes a very difficult situation, and then we're part of the solution. And everybody wants to be part of the solution. So whether you're a gate agent and you're trying to be a solution for a delayed flight, or you're a cargo loader who's helping to bring vaccines or ventilators during a global pandemic, you're part of the solution. And so that's what so makes our employees so proud of what we're doing at United.
From a talent standpoint, March and April of 2020, airplanes were grounded.
Yes.
You had members of your staff that were being offered early retirement and buyouts. There was the thought that this airline industry was going to be in for a long recovery. And then all of a sudden, was it the revenge travel came back?
It was.
And things started to explode in terms of travel. Take me back to that moment when you realize we need to start hiring again. We need to start staffing up again.
Well, so I just want to back up just to provide a little bit of context to what Stefan was saying here is that United Airlines in 2020 had 12,000 pilots. There were days in the early days of the pandemic where we only had 10,000 total passengers throughout our entire system. So that means only 1,000 people going through O'Hare in a given day. So when you talk about like turning the lights on and off, that is exactly what it is. And in the airline industry, you can't just turn the lights on and off because we do have a pretty long training period for all of our roles. So for pilots, for instance, between the time that you are hired and the time that you actually can fly, it can be 6 to 9 months to onboard. So when we knew that, we kept wondering, like, is this the time the pandemic's going to be over? Is this the time the pandemic's going to be over? And so we knew that we needed to pre-hire in a couple of areas, pilots in particular, because of the long training timelines. And that was not something that we had historically ever done. I think, the biggest hiring sprees we ever went through were 2,500 to 5,000 people. And in the first 2 years out of the pandemic, we did 15,000 people each year for 2 years, so over 30,000 new employees to United. So how do you bring people in, make sure they're trained, make sure that they are the right people for the right role, for the right outcome, and they are really latching onto your culture. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about when is the right time to kind of pull the trigger to get the team in place. And so a lot of pre-planning, that's for sure.
And a system that's still evolving to this day.
It is,
I can
absolutely.
imagine as well.
It is, absolutely.
I think about, and one of the things we were talking about with pilots, when you turn 65, you're forced to retire. Those are the rules by the FAA. So now you have a lot of pilots that are leaving the job and then this huge swell of new pilots that are coming in. What does that do to the culture to see this kind of rejuvenation, this youth coming in, and then some of the seniority that's leaving?
And we have tried to make it it's not just with our pilots, also with our customer service reps or our baggage handlers as well. Like our airport employees, 25% of our employees have less than 3 years with the airline. That's with a company where the average seniority is between 20 and 22 years. So just to give you an idea, like our turnover, so low that I'm sure a lot of you are like, like it's like 4 or 5% a year is what we see in turnover, in voluntary turnover. So we're very used to a very stable workforce. But bringing in that many people all at once, what it has done, and what we have, the airline industry is very, very much about training and mentorship. And two things have happened with that have been awesome. Is that a lot of that knowledge transfer from our more senior pilots and team members to our junior team members. I go back to the word pride because it's like, these are really cool jobs that these folks have. And so it's the pride of being able to share, hey, let me give you this knowledge. And by the way, isn't this like the coolest thing you've done all day? And it really is every time. So
there is something about mentorship when you have someone who's young and excited coming in and you can not only transfer that knowledge, but kind of enjoy in that spark again.
Absolutely, and we've actually, through some of our recognition programs, we have spent a lot of time and effort recognizing the people that are mentoring some of our new employees, and that has really been powerful too. So, whether it's a number of our pilots actually mentor kids that are going through flight school as well. So whether it's new employees or pilots going through flight school, that mentorship is just something it's a really give back type of approach with the aviation industry and at United.
And you've taken an innovative approach. You have your own flight school.
We do.
I think you're the only major airline to have your own in-house flight school.
We are. And so we have, thank you for bringing that up. We have, during the pandemic, when we knew that there was going to be a deficit of pilots, right? So everybody was going to need to be hiring pilots because there had been so many retirements during the pandemic. We said, hey, we really need to establish our own pipeline. We don't want to just rely on whatever is out there. And the other thing that we wanted to do is that the aviation industry is very white and male. And so we really wanted to open up the opportunity for aviation to as many people as we could. So we bought our own flight school in Goodyear, Arizona, because they have, it's not just Goodyear, but good weather on the regular.
Not Chicago?
I know. The past 2 days have been great, but before that, a little challenging. And we said, hey, we are going to invest in world-class training. And also, not just when you go to flight school, you learn all the technical issues with flying, but we really wanted to make sure that the pilots coming out of Aviate Academy also understood leadership and the United culture. And so that's where we really invested there. So there's about 250 students at Aviate Academy right now. Over 70% of them are either women or people of color. And we are really excited about that. The best thing about that, though, is that that investment was so interesting to so many people at the time we were doing it, that it really exploded for so many other folks, the idea that, hey, I can get into aviation. So I am excited about what we're doing at Aviate Academy, but I am more excited that more people are becoming interested in aviation because of the press that they've seen about Aviate Academy.
You walk through O'Hare and there's a big poster.
Oh yeah, there is.
In the B concourse, with the Cirrus airplane and the young pilots there, and you could be here.
Yeah, we've got an aviation expert here, so I'm a little bit on edge.
Well, and that's part of it. So I learned how to fly in 2006. I got my private pilot's license.
And it's very technical.
It's very technical. And that's the basic building block of learning how to fly. Then I got my instrument rating in 2007, and the economy went into free fall. The global recession was going on. The airlines had a huge surplus of pilots and not a lot of demand. So pilot pay was lower, quality of life wasn't very good. Back then, if you wanted to get to, say, United Airlines, you would have to work as maybe a cargo pilot or a regional pilot for several years, sometimes even an entire decade before you could get.
Yeah, it could be 5 or 10 years after you go through all your certifications to get to us at that time.
So now you're taking people literally from zero, they call it in the industry, zero to hero.
Yes.
From the basic building, and not just the time of training, but as you said, building that culture, building that identity as being a United employee. That's got to be something special.
It's really, I'm actually going out there in 2 weeks, and whenever you're having a bad day, we say just go out to the academy and you will just get all of that goodness and all of that excitement, and you just see, there's a little bit of a struggle because the qualifications and the training is tough, but that sense of accomplishment and what we're building there is just really fantastic.
Now, there is still a global pilot shortage, and there's this idea that there aren't enough people in the pipeline now to fill those seats of pilots that are hitting 65. I saw one study from consulting firm Oliver Wyman. They estimate it'll continue well into the decade with 17,000 pilots short by the year 2032. It sounds like you're able to keep these pilots, at least for United, in the pipeline and able to maintain this aggressive growth of adding routes, adding cities. Does that seem to be the case?
That is absolutely the case for United. We have over 2,500 pilots that are waiting to be interviewed at United. Where it's a bigger problem is for some of the regional carriers. So think, the United Express flights, the regional jets that you see, and also some of the, like the Spirits and Frontiers, for instance. That's because we pay more, and you have a greater income trajectory with us. So there's some challenges in different parts of the industry, but United is not currently having any issues with that at all.
So trying to get people in from the ground up. You just built a huge flight training center in Denver as well. Tell us about that and the investment in something like that, and how you expect it to pay off.
Yeah, so we have some cool toys at United Airlines, and one of them is our flight training center where you go into, we've got over 50 simulators there where our pilots go to train. And as we think about, the reason why it's an investment is because each one of our pilots every 6 months has to go back to the training center to up their qualifications. And then anytime they change aircraft type, so if you go from a 737 to call it a 787 or an Airbus, you spend a month out there learning all about the aircraft and all of that training. And so those types of investments are ones that we made during the pandemic. We started construction during the pandemic because we knew that when we looked at the pandemic, we said, okay, are we going to stay the same, or are we going to take this as an opportunity and really grow? And we said, hey, we aren't going to just come out where we came in. We really want to jump ahead. So we invested in a flight training center in Denver for our pilots. And then we also, though, invested in a in-flight training center in Houston for our flight attendants. So each of our flight attendants go through 6 to 8 weeks of training down in Houston, Texas, and everything from, how do the doors work, because every door is different on an aircraft, to any kind of cabin procedures we have, or the slides you hear every once in a while. Oh, there's rafts and everything. You never see them. Good thing. You don't want to see them, but you need to know they're there, and you need to know that the flight attendants know how to do them. We actually have a pool where they deploy the slides. I actually got to do that once. Kind of cool.
That's not easy to do.
No, and I don't want to ever do it in real life. Right. It was great in that controlled environment. But those are the kinds of investments we made during the pandemic, so that we made sure that we were ready on the backside, because the timeline is so great. You can't just decide to hire a flight attendant and have them show up the next day. You don't want that. We don't want that either.
Yeah, you have to think about the timeline of all of these things.
Yeah, that's why we're kind of in a little bit of a challenge right now.
So even now, let's talk about some of the challenges right now, because you had to pump the brakes. And I know we spent a lot of time talking about pilots, but with the issues with Boeing 737 MAX, there was the door that flew off of that Alaska Airlines flight, added scrutiny on some of the safety aspects of that aircraft. It's slowed the number of deliveries. And when Boeing can't deliver airplanes to United, that means you don't need as many pilots. So talk about that impact of an outside supplier having a technical issue and a safety issue, and what that's meant for your growth, not only from a business standpoint, but from an employee standpoint.
Yeah, so we anticipate the deliveries from Boeing and then have to back up 6 to 9 months from that for all of our pilots. They're the long training, long lead item, if you will. But there's also, there's the ramp agents, the gate agents, the flight attendants, the safety professionals, all of that. So pilots are just one element of that, but I'll use this for this story. When Boeing can't deliver an aircraft for us or pushes delivery of an aircraft, we have already hired those pilots. We hired them 6 or 9 months ago to make sure that we were ready for the original schedule. So we are oversubscribed on pilots right now, which is okay for where we are right now. But that's why the deliveries are so, the impact of the delay is so impactful to us. It's because we're carrying those extra costs, which can be problematic to a P&L. But for right now, we're just absorbing that.
And still trying to figure out growth plans in the future, because eventually these planes are going to be delivered.
Eventually they are. And it looks like, instead of being a 24 delivery, it could be a 25 or 26 delivery. So we are slowing some of our pilot hiring as a result of that. And you may have seen recently in the news that we were offering voluntary time off for some of our pilots. And so that's something that we in the industry do a lot. It just doesn't hit the news a lot, but in this instance it did. So if you don't, can I take that for a minute?
Absolutely.
One thing that happens, and I'm sure you all have this issue as well, is that you need to staff for your peak demand. And so our peak demand historically has been June or July, the summer travel season. And so combine summer travel season with our aircraft delivery timeline, and we are overstaffed in pilots and flight attendants and other work groups. And so a lot of we offer time off for our team members. We call them company leave of absence, COLA. Sometimes COLA is used for other terms, but that's what we call them. And we're able to offer that to our flight attendants and our pilots. Nobody is being forced to take this leave of absence if they don't want it. But sometimes people want to take the time off. If I can get a month off, I mean, I'd like a month off every once in a while. That'd be kind of cool. But they can't take the time off without pay and no ramifications to their job. So that's what was happening in the background. It just kind of got a little bit blown up in the past couple of weeks with everything else going on.
There's been a lot of media attention, of course, on Boeing
Yes.
and on everything going on.
And United.
And I think kind of lending to that, there is this idea of this is a super competitive business. You're not the only ones trying to staff up. All the other airlines are trying to do the same thing. I'm curious how you try to stay a step ahead of the competition and where you're finding this talent to keep one step ahead.
And it's so interesting because before the pandemic, a lot of the talent that we found was word of mouth talent of people that had worked at United or people that knew that here's the world's worst industry secret. If you work for an airline, you can fly free if there's a seat available. So that used to be like, did you know somebody and you could fly free? Post-pandemic, the thing that is our biggest attractor for new talent is our culture. The culture of a company that is has sustainability in the forefront, is interested in opportunity for all, and is also really innovative in doing new and cool things. So whether it's sustainable aviation fuels or supersonic jets, for instance, those things are the things that when I talk to new hires at United, that they get excited about. And I'm like, well, what about the flight benefits? They're like, oh yeah, and the flight benefits, right? But it's about the culture, and that's what matters to this young workforce. They care about how you show up in the community, and they care about what you're doing for the environment. And so that has been the big shift for us pre-pandemic to post-pandemic.
It's interesting to see, absolutely, what are the needs of the employees now.
So different, yeah.
Yeah, one of the big things we talk a lot about in the news and in aviation as well as mental health and trying to make sure those resources are available to flight crews that are under sometimes pretty stressful situations. What sort of resources are available to all of your employees at United?
And we've got an expert in this area right here, won an Emmy specifically on this topic. So
related to pilots, absolutely.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
So pilots, just so you know, if they get they could have their flight certificates taken away for a medical condition, and that could be a physical medical condition or a mental medical condition. So you could go from being a pilot and having flown for 10 or 15 years to all of a sudden not having a job. So that's why it's such a big deal for pilots. And the other thing that's happening is that the more senior workforce, they don't really talk about mental health. The junior workforce, they're talking about mental health all the time. And so we have changed at United how we use our employee assistance programs, how we make things accessible to our team. We previously had just used counselors. We are now amping that up to include more specialists or more, also increasing the number of sessions that the company offers. And that is not only something that is good for the employee, but it's something that, quite frankly, during recruiting, people are asking about. What do you offer from a mental health perspective? And not just for the pilots, but for all of our work groups, whether it's video, whether it's in person, whether it's telehealth, they're interested in all of that and asking those questions straight up.
It's a big topic.
Big topic.
Especially for pilot, because there is that issue that if you lose your medical, you could be grounded. There was a United Airlines pilot who spoke in front of the NTSB in that hearing about mental health related to breaking down barriers that pilots can feel comfortable and safe to approach these issues without losing their medical certificate.
Yeah, so this is going to bubble up. We're talking about a recent hearing, and there's all kinds of, there's a real movement around this right now, which I think is really great.
We're just about out of time, but I think the big theme that I'm realizing is through the resiliency of the airline industry, and in particular United, once you turn those talent engines on, you really can't turn them off. You have to keep going.
Yeah, turning them off is it's super dangerous to your business, right? And so we are, even though we're slowing down some of our hiring efforts, for instance, we are making sure that we are holding a certain number of jobs so that we can continue to recruit at different conferences and things like that, so we continue that pipeline going. But also on the training side, once you shut it down, getting the momentum back up is so hard. So that's something we're really focused on.
All right. Well,
And it makes in the dark days when there were only 10,000 passengers, the easy answer would have been shut it all down. And thank goodness we didn't.
Absolutely. What scary times those were.
Yes, exactly.
Well, glad to see things are soaring and doing well.
They are. We're ready for takeoff. I hope you are too. Someplace awesome.
I could use a vacation right about now.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great
Perfect.
idea.
Hey, Gebo, it was great to talk to you. Thank you so
much. Thank you very much.
Appreciate
I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.